Silverware is no good anymore. We're going to use this stuff. As things were taken away from us gradually, uh, I didn't know much about it because my parents always sheltered me. My father lost his job and I was extremely happy because all of a sudden Daddy was home to play with me, and that was okay. So my mother started sewing. She was a very good seamstress and she started sewing at home, so that's how we existed through the tough times in Germany. But in 1941, in the middle of the night, we heard a loud knocking at our door, and the SS came in and they said, "You gotta be ready in 20 minutes, and you're being resettled into a better place." What could be better than a home? I was happy there. Why should we be resettled? But that was our lot. My mother kept saying, "Put on more clothes, put on more clothes." So I was packed with clothes and I could barely walk, but I had all kinds of clothes on. And we went, they took us in a truck to a gathering place where they gathered up many Jews. It was a slaughterhouse at one time. There were people hanging on hooks, screaming and dying and bleeding. And my parents held me close to them, both of them, so I wouldn't see. But I did hear the screams and I did smell the blood flowing. And it was a terrible place. But my parents convinced me that as long as the three of us together, nothing will happen to you. But unfortunately, that didn't last that long either. We stayed in that gathering place for a while, and then we were put on cattle cars, hundreds of us in one car, and we drove, and we drove, and we drove. Many people died in the car or passed out. There was only one pot in the center of the car to put the excretions, and pretty soon it overflowed, and it was a terrible smell in the car, and it was just horrible. We drove and drove in that car for quite a while. I don't really know how long. But when we arrived in the ghetto of Lodz. Lodz is a Polish city. They had evacuated all the Jews from Lodz that lived in the city of Lodz and put them in the ghetto. They were already unhappy and living in miserable quarters. They were already unhappy because there was not much food around. And all of a sudden, they're dumping thousands of German Jews into this area. Well, the Polish Jews were not happy about it, and we had a very tough time in Lodz. But we did find a little place to live, and we got along, and things moved on until my father worked. They took the men out of the ghetto and made them work at hard labor, digging ditches and doing things like that. The good part was he brought home coffee grounds that he could find in the garbage and potato peels which he could find in the garbage, and that was our dinner usually. But one day the men gathered in the marketplace to be taken outside. But one day they made them run around in the marketplace in a circle, and they used the men for target practice. My father was shot. My mother was heartbroken, and so was I. Now we didn't have our daddy anymore. My mother worked in a sewing factory. She sewed uniforms for German soldiers. I had to sew in the same place, and I had to sew buttons on the uniforms. It was hard work for me because I was only 13 and my fingers were kind of sensitive still to sew these old buttons on. But we did, and my mother worked and became very ill. Finally, she was so sick she couldn't work anymore. So I tried to take care of her and go to work. And life went on. But it didn't go on very well. On my 14th birthday, my mother seemed to be a little bit better. She got out of bed and she was sitting up, and she was saying happy birthday to me, and she had a present for me. The present was the thing that I had wanted most of all, an onion to put onto the little potato the patties that she made out of coffee ground and potato peels and a little bit of mineral oil. She baked them, and that was our supper. And I used to say, if I had an onion, that would be just great. But we couldn't find any onions. But on my birthday, my mother had an onion for me, and I couldn't believe that she got it, or where she got it, or anything. But it was the best birthday present I ever had. But after she gave me the onion, she got very tired. She went back to bed, and she passed away that day. Now my mama was dead too. I had nobody. There was no more all three of us. There was just me. I still had to go to work, but I was fortunate. The eldest of the Jews, who was kind of in charge of the ghetto, came around every so often, and he picked out some children that he took to a home. He had 8 children that he singled out, 4 girls and 4 boys. He took us to an apartment, and we had it a little better there. One girl was Czechoslovakian, one girl was Russian, I was German, and the 4th one was Polish. But we all lived together and became camp sisters, and our friendship lasted many, many years through many, many trials. We lived in the ghetto, and we lived comparatively well. We went to work, we came home, we had a housekeeper. She kept the place, and she, the eldest of the Jews, gave a little bit of food, more food to us. So we survived a little better. And in the evenings when we were home after work, we had the 8 of us, and we used to play games and do things, and we lived like a family. That lasted for a while, and then the Russians came closer to the city of Lodz, and the Germans decided they had to empty the ghetto. Gradually, everybody was called to the marketplace and loaded on cattle cars and taken off. We knew through the grapevines that it was going to Auschwitz. We were one of the last transports, but we too went to Auschwitz. We arrived in Auschwitz. The boys were taken to one side, and the 4 girls were clinging together like glue. We lied about our age. 1 minute we were 16, 1 minute we were 14, whatever suited us best. whatever seemed to be the right thing to do, that's what we did. Our boys were taken to the other side and never heard from again. Our beautiful, beautiful teenage boys were killed. We lived in Auschwitz for a short period of time. We were in a barracks, 5 people in a row, and there was roll call every few minutes. The barracks were close to the gas chambers. We could smell the smoke when it came out, and we could see the smoke. It was very frightening for us to be there. We are still clinging together, but we were scared, very, very scared. Then one day we were cold. Again, the 4 of us went together, and we thought this was the end of our lives. We went in front, and first they shaved our heads, and it was pretty dehumanizing to lose every bit of our hair. We were only 15 years old, and hair was very important to us. They also made us undress and be completely naked in front of those soldiers, male soldiers. We were little girls. We weren't used to that kind of thing. Then they shoved us into the showers, but we thought this was the end of our life, but the showers were water, and the water cleaned us off. Then they threw some towels at us, and we dried off, and they packed us back onto cattle cars. We drove to Hamburg. In Hamburg, we went to a warehouse, and from the warehouse we were sorted out, and we went to different work camps. The 4 of us went to a place called Pappenbüttel, Neuengamme. I don't know if you heard of any of these names. They were sub-camps, but they all had little areas. I have a picture of Neuengamme where I was. They had one league of that they called the 100-day work camp. The people worked so hard there that they could only live for 100 days because there was so little food, and they worked so hard that they died. If they weren't shot, they died of starvation and hard work. The work camps for us were also very hard. We went every day into Hamburg and gathered the stones, gathered the debris of the streets, and we had to put it in these big containers, what they called Loren, big containers. Then when they were filled, 2 girls had to take the Loren and shove them up a hill and dump the dirt out. Then when the Loren were empty, we brought them back and we had to refill them. All this was done over and over again, and 2 girls worked together, and a soldier was standing over us at all times with his gun ready. It was a frightening job, and we worked very, very hard. The food in the camp was very minimal. We got one big slice of bread, about yay big, and some what they called coffee, which was brown water, in the morning. We took the piece of bread and cut it into 4 pieces, and we only ate a quarter each. At lunchtime, we got water, so we could have another quarter of the bread and the water. And at dinner time, when we came back from our work, we got some soup, which was water with some turnips and some potato peels. And we ate that, and we ate a quarter piece of bread with it. Then before we went to sleep, we had another piece of the quarter bread, and we ate that, and we got water to go with it. By sharing, I think we saved our lives. We worked together, we were together, and we shared together. We also shared our beds, and being two, we had double the amount of mattress. We had 2 blankets, and we slept in one bed and kept each other warm. So went to camp, and we were there for quite a while working. And after a while, they had to empty that camp too. So they took us in trucks out of Hamburg, and from Hamburg, after we got out of the city of Hamburg, they made us walk, and we walked probably 90 or more miles from Hamburg to Bergen-Belsen. Everybody was getting sick. We had to walk and walk and walk and hold each other up, because if you sat down, they would shoot you. If you tried to run, they would shoot you. They were riding in jeeps next to us with their guns, so there was no way of escaping or doing anything except putting one foot in front of the other and walking and holding each other up so we didn't fall. We had very little breaks. Once in a while we were allowed to sit down, and they tried to bring around a little bit of water. We walked for many days, I guess, because I remember it getting dark and light. We arrived in Bergen-Belsen, and we were separated. I was very, very sick. I had typhus fever and tuberculosis. I went, it was April, and the troops came in, the British and the American troops came in and freed Bergen-Belsen. I was taken to a hospital. I was 17 years old or 18 years old, and I weighed 46 pounds. I could hardly stand on my feet. I was taken to a MASH type hospital, and they cured me of the typhus. After the typhus was not contagious anymore, a Swedish count came through, and he took a bunch of teenagers to Sweden. I was very fortunate, and I went to Sweden. In Sweden, they took very good care of us. And I gained weight. My legs were so thin that I could put my fingers around my thighs like this. And every morning that we woke up, we would measure our thighs, and gradually they kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and finally they're fat now. So time went on in the hospital, and fortunately streptomycin came into the world, and they cured our tuberculosis, and they cured all our ills, and I was getting much healthier. In the meantime, everybody had visitors there because the war had ended, and the diplomats from different countries came to visit the people that were from their country. There were Czech people with me in the hospital. There were people from Poland. There were people from Hungary. There were people from all over. Girls, and we were in one room, and they would get company, and I would be laying there and get no company at all. But finally, a man from Sweden, a private citizen, heard about me, and he came to visit me. We formed a bond immediately, so he came and brought me things, and when I was able to walk around, this took a year and a half, so it wasn't like I am telling you now, these things didn't happen this rapidly. But he took me to his home, and I got together with his family and his children. He had 2 children, Margit and Ursula, and he treated me like one of his daughters. I lived there for 3.5 years, and then my aunt found me through World Jewish Congress. She was looking for my mother, but she found me, and she insisted that I come to the States. It was kind of tough parting from my Swedish family, but I did, and I came to the United States. It was so nice that after that I was with these children, and just fairly recently, a few years ago, I only knew the girl's name, first name, but the Federation had a party of some sort, or a talk, and I went to it, and I met the Swedish professor there. And I told them that I was in Sweden, and I told them of the girls, and he says, I'm going to find these 2 girls for you. And he did. He found my 2 little sisters, and I was able to talk to them on the telephone. Then one day I was talking at a university in Miami, because my niece is a professor there. And I talked to a group there, and after I talked there, the dean of the school said he called my niece, and he said, I'm going to send these 2 girls to Sweden so they can meet with the little sisters. And it was a great thing. He did sponsor us to go to Sweden 2 years ago, and we met my 2 little sisters, who are not little anymore. They're ladies, and one turned 80 and one is not quite 80 yet. She's 78. And it was wonderful. We got to the baggage place, and they immediately recognized me from my voice, and they came over and hugged me and said, you're my big sister. Come on, come on. And we went to their home, and we had a wonderful time in Sweden. Meanwhile, here in the States, after I came here, I went to school, to high school, and finished in 1.5 years with Regent examinations. I cheated a little bit because I took German as a foreign language, and that was quite easy for me. Actually, the English part was hard. But I graduated, and I tried to get into a nursing school, and in New York, I needed to be a citizen, so couldn't go to school there. So I went to Philadelphia to what was at first Jewish hospital, and later on turned into Einstein Medical Center. I graduated from Einstein Medical Center in 1951, a long time ago. I worked all my life as a nurse, and I also went to school and got my bachelor's degree in nursing and health. After I graduated from high school, I went into nursing, and I met my roommate's brother. I had a very lovely roommate, and she took me to her home because it was much closer to Philadelphia than my aunt's house in New York. And I met her brother, and we fell in love. And after I graduated from nursing, we married. I was married for 65 years to one man that I dearly loved, and I wish he was still around. We had 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls. We were a perfect family. And now I have 4 lovely grandchildren. 2 of them live in different places. I can't keep track of them. They're always moving around. One is in Washington, D.C. One is in Philadelphia. I have 2 other grandchildren that live in Orlando and Gainesville. So everybody is kind of, sort of, a little bit close enough to see them, which is my joy and my life. But out of all this misery came my new family, and that I'm very, very proud of. All of them are college graduates, and that makes me very happy. We got to learn to live together and to be kind to each other and to like each other, no color what we are, no matter what religion we are, no matter what we are, because only hatred will kill us.
Thank you. Wow. Thank you, Helga. Do you want to take questions?
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody want to ask a question? You can raise your hands.
Is there any way, could this be recorded I would love to buy this, I would like to give it to my niece, is there any way that this is recorded, or do you have a DVD or something?
I'll write down the information where you can
You
go to
write the
YouTube.
information down. It's on.
Please.
I will, I'll write it down for you.
We will write down the information. It's on YouTube under my son's name, and you can go to it and you will see the whole history in much more detail than I told you here.
That's great.
How about I'll email it to Julie, and then maybe Julie you can distribute it here for the residents. Also, I did videotape today's event as well. I'll try to upload it on YouTube. Yes.
You may know already, but are you aware that Spielberg is making a collection, has been doing it for years, and he will send someone to you, they will interview you and add your story to the Holocaust museums.
I have given my story to the Holocaust Museum.
You have done.
In New
I
York.
figured you might, yes, but it's a wonderful, wonderful work that they do, yes. Good for
I
you.
have done that,
If you go to the Holocaust Museum's website,
both in Washington and in St. Petersburg.
correct. And if you search her name, you'll get the video of the interview. I think it's a 2-hour interview. Yes. Anybody else?
Is that your daughter? My kids went to the Holocaust Museum in Russia, I believe, and my daughter said it was the most horrifying experience, and she will never forget it, ever.
We had the opportunity to go to Auschwitz, and it was very depressing. And we started out the day in good spirits and everything, ended up the day very sad and sorrowful. It was the worst day of our trip, but it was an interesting learning period. That I don't know how people can say that this never happened. That's ridiculous.
That's why I'm talking, because there were still people that don't believe it ever happened. But I was there, so I can tell you, it happened.
Anybody else wants to ask a question, raise your hands.
Your three lady friends or girlfriends that you had, were you able to find out what happened to them?
Yes, I was able to find out. One of them, Mirka, came to Sweden too, and she married in Sweden and raised a family there. Maja came to this country. Relatives brought her here, and she married a professor from a school in Bronx, New York, and lived there, and I saw her frequently. The other one, Genya, lived upstate New York, and I used to go to camp with my children and grandchildren as a camp nurse. And when I had free time, I used to visit her, and I used to see her once a year during camp season.
Hi Helga, thank you for sharing with us. I wonder if you've been back to Germany, if you felt any desire to go back?
Yes, I went to Germany last year. It was a very interesting trip. It was a very emotional trip. But my daughter and my son-in-law and two of my grandchildren were with me. We found some friends there. I went to the house that I was born in, and we saw my school, and we saw a lot of things. The Germans are very receptive now, and I'm going back in September. They're going to put stones in for my parents, and the stones will tell that they were murdered by the Nazis. And I'm very proud of that, because they don't have a gravestone, so now they will be remembered by that.
Anybody else?
Do you ever have the opportunity to speak to younger groups, younger in age?
I speak to the schools at least twice or three times a year to different schools. I speak in this area, Venice High School, Pine Brook, Leadership School. There's several schools that are around here, and Northport School. And I also spoke to children in Germany. When I was in Germany, I spoke to to a class of German school children.
At the Anne Frank Museum.
Helga, you're a remarkable woman.
Thank
And
you.
what makes you even more remarkable is that there's no hatred in you. Based on the experiences you've had, the average person would hate, but you don't.
No hatred. There should not be any hatred. You don't have to love each other, but you don't have to hate anybody.
Thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
Anybody else want to ask a question?
Yeah, up front.
Up front.
My wife was born in Germany, and she was 16 years old on Kristallnacht, and she escaped Germany in Kristallnacht. And she went to England, And from England, she got on a boat and came to the United States.
Yeah,
Left.
many children went with the kinder transport to England.
She traveled alone. She traveled alone.
Yes, she traveled alone. She got on a train in Berlin and went to England. Had a cousin who lived in England, and she put her on the Queen Mary, and she came across.
All right. Anybody else? I want to just close out with a brief encounter I had a few years ago. I heard about another survivor living in Englewood. I went over to his house, and he didn't really want to meet me. He didn't want to meet a Jewish person, himself being a Jewish survivor. He was so afraid that somebody will know that he's Jewish. And when I walked into his house and knocked on his door, he saw me with a kippah. He started to cry. And he started speaking in Yiddish, the language he grew up in Poland before the war. And he told me he was taken to Auschwitz, and his whole family got killed. And after the war, he wanted to have nothing to do with religion, and came to the States and was hiding, literally living for 70 years in isolation, being afraid that they'll know that he's Jewish. And when we spoke, we sat down, and I showed him, today we're so blessed to live in this country, and we have Israel. And today we can proudly walk around as Jews and celebrate our Jewish identity. The Nazis did not succeed in getting rid of us. We are around today, and we will be around forever. So we say, Am Yisrael Chai. And he had such a smile on his face. He asked me to pray with him the first time after 70 years. It was a beautiful, beautiful, heartwarming experience. So my message today, and I want to thank Helga, she's my personal inspiration when I met Helga 14 years ago, is yes, and as we said earlier, going to Auschwitz, horrible. Everything that happened is the horrors we cannot even imagine.
But you have to see to believe.
And absolutely, you have to see it to believe, and we have to teach our children what happened, but we also have to teach our children that you should not be afraid of who you are, no matter which religion, and be proud of who you are, and celebrate your freedom, and celebrate your religion, and that is an uplifting experience. We take teenagers to Poland. It's called March of the Living. We take them to Auschwitz, and right after they're finishing for a few days the tours, and they're horrified, and they're very sad, we take them on a plane to Israel. When they land in Israel, they see Jewish life, and they see how we have survived and how we're thriving today. That is a very powerful impact on them. I want to thank Helga again. Thank you, Helga. You are our inspiration. Wish you, God bless you, long health, and happiness and joy. Thank you, Lisa. You want to say something?
I wanted to tell you that what you were referring to, Rabbi, be proud. When we had a